So, talking to God, that's something that we all can work on through our entire lives, and it is something I'm still really trying to figure out. There are some things I know, and then there's a lot of things I don't know, and Tim and I are currently processing through that. And so, since today is Get Naked Monday, we're going to be going through our process through learning that right now. So, let's jump right into that. Well, welcome back to thoughtraid, a show where we take on thoughts and find better ways of thinking about them. I'm Brandon, this is Tim, and today is Get Naked Monday, where we metaphorically get naked and talk about what...
If you were ever at, like, the bottom of... in a valley. If you were in a valley...
If I was in a valley.
If you were in a valley, would you ever allow yourself to do OnlyFans and just, like, sell feet pics or something?
No.
Really? What
No.
if you could make $1,000 a week just by selling pictures of your feet?
I can find much more not demeaning things to make money. Some way, some form, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm good. But on that note, hello. So today we're going to be talking specifically about just the process Tim and I are going through when it comes to learning how to hear God's voice, what that's like, because it's different. Between you and me, it's different. And I'm legitimately going through a moment right now where I've just hit some moments where it's like, I think I hear God's voice, but it doesn't, it's not, I don't know. I don't know. It didn't seem to fit. And I'm asking God, and I'm not really getting, it's like a dead end connection.
Yeah.
About what I'm trying to get information on. And when I do go to God about it, I get the most frustrating statement of, what do you think? And it's like, I don't care what I think. This is not about what Brandon Brown thinks. This is about, what does God think?
Don't forget to hit the button, Brandon.
Of course.
Yeah, well, I guess it was different for you because you were raised a Christian. Do you remember hearing God's voice for the first time? And what that was like?
I remember specific things. I couldn't tell you if God was talking to me, but I remember being on a swing set and singing to God, and it was just me and him, far as I could remember, back in Florida. So this is many years ago. I think I was maybe in second grade, maybe somewhere around that time frame. And I was trying to swing as hard as I could, like get that sucker almost 90 degrees. And I'm singing as I'm going back and forth.
What were you singing?
It was all inspirational. Like I wasn't singing a song, I was making up a song. I wasn't like singing a pre-existing song like that.
5-year-old Brandon singing inspirational music. You're just such a pure person.
Yes, so pure. But that's what I did, and I'm pretty sure I was talking to God during that time. I vaguely remember that, and I might have heard back from him too, but I don't. But it's been so many years. I don't. If he did, I don't have any kind of vivid recollection of that. That's saying you think it's God when you realize it was me the whole time. It was me, Dio. I still need to watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but that's beside the topic. So I did that, and now I'm going through a phase where I feel much more confident hearing God's voice. But then there was just like one moment where I was thinking about a particular person, and I felt like I didn't know what to do, and I felt like all of a sudden this length of time where I should take a step away from the person came in, and I was like, it was like a month, and it was quiet, but at the same time it didn't feel like it fit, but it also didn't feel like it didn't fit.
Was this recent?
Yeah, very recent. And I've been like trying to like weigh that out until like today or maybe yesterday. It felt like I got more of a direction of like, I don't know, it wasn't a critical issue. kind of thing. So like, I think God was sharing with me, like, if you were in a situation where it was truly life or death, and like the decision you made next could change everything, I would be much more intentional that you would hear and know what my will was than I would in a situation that wouldn't necessarily be life or death. That's why I felt more solid that God was responding, but it didn't satisfy the fact that it's like I had what felt like direction, but every time I would try to go to God, but like, where did this direction come from? Was this just me pooping out an answer, or was it you giving me something? I can't tell.
Yeah, it's weird because when I was not a Christian, I always had to navigate what was right from wrong or what to do next on my own. It's like, okay, well, what are my goals? What am I trying to do? This is to the extent of my knowledge. All I know to do, and I just did my best. And when I became a Christian, things just became kind of different, you know? Like, when I acknowledged, oh, okay, so there's this cosmic being named God, Jehovah Jireh, that wants to have a relationship with me. Apparently, he's my dad. I guess he's also my friend. Apparently, like, he's paying close attention to my situation. He's not too busy for me ever. I don't know. I kind of, in an ignorant way, jumped into that without thinking about it too hard. Mm-hmm. I just started talking, you know, and expecting that he was going to respond. And then lots of really cool stuff started to happen. You know, I don't know if it's coincidence. I always challenge coincidence because I'm like, a good coincidence is when God is doing something, you know. But that first year, when I became a Christian, because you were present, like lots of ridiculous stuff started happening. Just like people being prompted to tell me certain things or give me certain things or spend time with me, or just like I would get an inclination to go somewhere or do something specific, and it would just produce all these crazy results, you know. But it's also strange because I'm 6 or 7 years into my Christianity. I don't even know how you say that. I've been born again for 7 years if you want to get technical.
It's a good wow.
Yeah, and you know, it's kind of like when you're dating somebody. When you first get introduced to that relationship, it's really fresh and new. And so you make sure that your texting is perfect. I did that with my wife too. When we first started dating, any text that I would send her, I would make sure that my punctuation was perfect, my capitalization. Like if I mistyped something, I would go back and I would just deliver something perfect. And now it's like I mistyped the word boob. Not that I would ever type a boob. Like I was typing nude or something.
These are things I may not want to know.
Like I was trying to relate a story and I tried to use the word noob and it auto-corrected to boob and I just sent it. Or something like that. There was something ridiculous. But now it's like I don't really care that much to censor myself. And it's kind of the same way with God too. I don't really censor myself as much. I don't think I did back then. I'm not sure. But now it's like my relationship has matured. So the way that I communicate has also matured as well, because there were certain things back then that were new that I didn't take for granted, and now I do take it for granted, and I have to be more intentional to pay attention to those things. I mean, is it the same thing for you?
Well, I mean, like there's certain things that I wasn't aware of that I am aware of now, and there's certain things that I wouldn't have done that I do now. Like the way I don't know if this is exactly what you're asking, but my mind latched on to like the whole thing of like you were very cautious about how you texted your wife in the beginning, and then you just slowly, it didn't matter anymore. Exactly. But like in the same way with me talking to God, like I used to be a little more like, you know, I made sure that I didn't say anything that would be counter to my faith. That I was very precise about how I said things. Like, you know, I didn't want to ever talk to God about like, oh, I'm angry, or not necessarily that I'm angry, but like I didn't want to say anything that would like, you know, be like, I'm sick, I'm this or that, something negative or whatever. Yeah. Like, if I were to say anything faith related, it would always be like very precise and intentional. Like I would try not to say anything that would say that I'm not in faith or whatever. And then over time, I'm just like, well, forget that. Like, because God already knows all of my thoughts. There's no reason for me to try to pretend like I can, hide these thoughts from God. So I just tell him how I am and what makes me angry or whatever. And then we work through it.
Yeah, I guess what you're saying, if I can sum it up, you're okay with being actually real with God without being so guarded.
Yeah, there's no reason. If God has no needs, then they're really it's not like a needy person requires you to act a certain way, do certain things, spend a specific amount of time with them. But a person who has no needs there's no expectation put on like someone you're interacting with who does have needs. Like, it's just like you might put boundaries with them, but you're not like you have to do this with me or that or whatever. It's not the case. Like, God has no needs for us. There's no reason for us to. He prefers a heart that is righteous, not just sacrifices.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Like, if you look at your words could be sacrificial to God, and you're very choosy in how you speak to Him. But like, that's not where's your heart at, though. Like, if you want to be eloquent and it's coming out of the bottom of your heart, then please, by all means, do that. But if you're doing it because tradition tells you so, it's a waste of time.
Yeah. So what the title for today is, we're getting naked about learning how to talk to God, and specifically how we do it. Ooh, I'm showing a lot of chest.
Scandalous. It really is Get Naked Monday.
It is really thoughtraid OnlyFans. There we go. It's a little bit more professional. But the way that your relationship with God has matured has been slightly different from mine. In the past year with COVID, talking to God has been a little bit different for both of us. And I know that He relates to me in a different way. He relates to you much different way. For me, I'm really big on written word. Like, I had tons of journals. If you could see my office, I've got notebooks and all these notes written around and just all these things. And I like animals too. Like, I've got so many pictures of Frenchies and various animals. Like, I've got frog mugs and fox mugs. And
Can confirm.
God knows how to talk to me that way. I mean, my wife knows how to talk to me that way. And I always liken my relationship with God with my relationship with my wife. Because it's a relationship, man. It's not... The thing that confounds me about Christian faith is that a lot of people enter into it as God is God and I am just a normal plebeian peasant human, and there's never going to be a relationship because it's all me being in submission. And it's like, if I go before God, I have to make sure that I'm clean and perfect and tidy. And
that's literally impossible. It is literally impossible not to have an intimate relationship with God because He's omnipresent. And omniscient. So He knows every thought you have.
It's like, God, I need you to wait out here. I need to take a poop. You can't see this.
If you think about it logically, it's not possible to not have an intimate relationship with God. There's no way you can. It's all just a matter of, do we decide to recognize His presence or just, ignore Him entirely?
Yeah.
That's how it boils down to. But that, I don't know, that just hit me. Just recognizing the futility of thinking that you cannot have an intimate relationship with God. You can't escape an intimate relationship with God.
Also, if you're married, you can't escape that divorce and whatnot. But if you live in the same household, you sleep in the same bed, you share the same food and the same bank account, there are conversations that are going to be had because you share the same space.
He's like your wife, but worse.
But better.
You can't get away from God. You can get away from your wife.
What is Bryce saying over there?
How do you communicate with God if all you know is the traditional and mainstream ways? So how do you communicate with God if all you know is the traditional? I feel like it's just a matter of... the way that I got to communicating with God as I presently am is through experience, experimentation, and talking to people. And learning. I spend time in my life. There were certain you and I have shared the same church. So your church has a specific amount of you've got pastor, and then you've got Porter I forget her exact...
Gerbs!
Sorry. Some porter, you have different types of people that are connected to the church. And you begin to see, as it spans out different types of people, you can explore the relationship those people have with God by sitting in their sermons, finding them on YouTube and listening to what they have to say. A lot of what I've gotten has been just experimentation and observation. Like, I've observed how you interact with God. I've observed how my different pastors have interacted with God. I've observed, particularly, I pulled a lot from Todd White and Dan Mohler and how they interact with God, and a few others, or John Bevere. And I just kind of pull from these people, and then as I'm doing that, I'm constructing my own form of communication with God out of that, and paying attention to what are the moments where I feel like I hear God the most. And for my case, it's usually auditory, like not outside my ears, but I can hear a voice. And sometimes it's sensory as well, like I can feel God's presence. Like, for instance, goosebumps is a thing. Whenever I land upon a thought that is God inspired, I get goosebumps from that.
Are you ever skeptical that the goosebumps or things you think that you hear, are you ever skeptical of whether or not it is God?
Yes, at the very exact same time, I am both know that's God and also don't know it's God, and I constantly am trying to figure that out.
Yeah, because this is a question that a lot of people, especially if you guys don't know, I stream on Twitch and on Discord to different things, and I talk a lot to people that I've never met before, probably never will meet, about God, and I just include them in my process, and just am honest about it, because that's really all I've got. And one of their frequent questions is, well, how do you know it's actually God? How do you know it's not? And the skepticism creeps in. And in communicating that to somebody, it's really hard,
Right.
because you can't prove it. Sometimes I wish God would just materialize and say, hey, Tim's not lying about this, hashtag God, and then poof, disappears. But, Bryce, I think your question is a really good question, because your question is why I chose not to engage in the Christian faith for so many years, because I was really skeptical, man. And there were all these whitewashed ways of engaging with a Christian relationship with God. And most of it was just checks and balances. Most of it was, are you paying your tithe? Are you going to church on Sunday? Are you following the 10 Commandments? Do you know Scripture? Do you know the order? How many books are in the Bible and the order of them? And there were all these pharisaical perspectives. But I just kind of using an analogy for this. I remember in high school, especially high school, middle school too, dating was a big thing. It's like you go to school for the education, but everybody knows if you went to public school, you go to school for relationships, dating, and trying to fit in socially. I honestly think that school is 90% social and 10% educational. But
I think it should be, honestly. If it's not, it should be, because I think social skills are probably almost more important than any other skills nowadays, especially.
Yeah, and even in the church, and tying that in, if you think about the stuff that Jesus had issue with, it wasn't the specifics of what people were or were not doing. It was all relationship, the social aspect of being in relationship with God. But the reason I bring this high school stuff up is because I remember there was this girl in high school that asked me out. And I was like, cool, because I thought she was pretty, and I wasn't dating anybody at the same time. And it was between classes, this girl comes in, and it's her friend, and she hands me a note, and the girl says, hey, I think you're pretty cute or hot or something like that. And do you want to go out with me? Check yes, yes, no, check no. Maybe it wasn't even that. It was maybe just communicating, and had a phone number. I don't recall. But I remember being excited about that. And then on the bus ride home from school, I was telling some neighbors of mine, they were friends too, but neighbors, whatever. And they were like, oh, she's a whore. She actually sleeps around and she does all these things. She does this and that. She's whatever. And it formed this worldview of her that I didn't experience firsthand. I had a group of people telling me that in order to engage with this person, here are the boundaries you need to put up because X, Y, Z, because their character is this, right? And in middle school, same thing happened. There was this girl that I was going out with, and I was running in PE with this buddy of mine, and this girl shared the same first name as some other really popular girl that all the guys thought were really hot. And when I communicated to my buddy who it was, he's like, "Oh, you don't mean so and so, do you?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I do." I'm talking about the other less popular girl, and he was like, "Ooh," and made me feel bad about it. And he was like, "Well, she's this and she's this and she's this," and I was like, immediately I wasn't as enamored with that relationship because the social construct around what was and was not accepted or how other people engage with it. All that to say, I bring it up because the church has a tendency to do that too. I was talking to a guy last night about this, and he said we were talking about communicating with God, and the standard has always been really confusing. Actually, I'm conflating this conversation with one that I had last week with somebody else. But either way, the conversation was the expectation that was set, the standard that was set about how you engage with God is very sterile. You go to church, and if anybody professes, "Oh, I hear God's voice," and they're running around, whatever,
like a turkey.
Sure. I mean, especially Pentecostal churches, it's like, are you actually doing that because you're talking to God, or are you doing that just for show? Right? And some people, they're like, that's definitely God, because they've been taught you don't question the faith. If you question the faith or how somebody hears from God, you are a heretic or heretic, whatever, however you say that word.
Heretic.
And then other people are like, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure if this is actually them with skepticism. But typically a lot of people, at least in my situation, you're on one of those sides. It's either you believe ignorantly wholehearted just because that's what you're taught, or you're skeptical wholehearted because that's what you're taught. So I guess to answer your question, I would really address why you believe the traditional ways. With each of these girls, I had to stop and ask myself, well, what do I think about this? And why do I think about this? Why? Just because one guy was like, ooh, you probably, or my neighbors, you should be careful because she sleeps around. Well, so what, man? If I took that same situation and transplanted that 10 years down the road to me being in my late 20s, 90% of people, roughly, I'm just throwing a number out there, sleep with somebody before they even hit their 20s. Right? So it would have been a moot point later on in life, right? I would have thought, okay, do I like this girl or not? Especially if I'm a Christian, because it has the potential to be redeemed, right? So it's a moot point what other people think. My part of maturity is asking yourself, okay, well, why do I believe this? What am I going to latch onto because I'm responsible for myself?
It's not really a danger to be dating someone who's slept around with a whole bunch of people if your heart's in the right place. Because I dated a girl in my senior year, who I'm fairly certain also got around. In fact, after a month of dating her, that's what happened. She went on to someone else while we were still in a relationship. No less. And I was just like, wow, okay. But nothing happened. Nothing happened that shouldn't have happened other than I brought her to church and she got saved. So I don't think, again, this is going off into a different topic entirely, but I don't think we forget that we are still in the world. We may not be of the world, but we're still in the world, which means that we don't need to forget our humanity and just try to prepare ourselves to go to heaven and do nothing else. We don't need to worry about the world. Jesus came in the world, and everywhere he went, he brought purity to that situation. Mm-hmm. He brought purity to the prostitute. His blood covered their sins. Before Jesus, you shouldn't touch dead things, you shouldn't touch bad things, whatever. You should stone certain people for doing certain things because it could get on you and then corrupt you. Mm-hmm. When Jesus came into the picture, Jesus just started covering all that stuff. Whatever he touched, he covered it. Not literally in the time when he was physically here, it wasn't literally covering people with blood, but it was just his righteousness covered the situation. Mm-hmm. And now that we have him on the inside of us, we too can do what he did and cover a multitude of sin with the love that he has given us. So there's no reason for us to try to run away from the world and pretend like it doesn't exist or that it will somehow corrupt us, because greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world. If we are more so going into it so that we can have a good time, well, your heart's in the wrong place. But if you're going into it because, and when I say good time, I don't mean like literally like a good time. I'm talking about like you want to go and you want to do something you know is wrong. That's a different story. But if your heart's in the right place, go there. Go to that bar. Go to that wherever it is. I don't know about going to a stripper club per se, but like there's just certain places that I think they've been like, can't touch that. But like now we have Christ in us, and if your heart is pure, then the desire to do sinful things is not going to be there, and you'll be able to bring the light into a place that otherwise would be dark, such as video games, such as we need to be bringing it into television. We need to be bringing Jesus everywhere we go. Anyways, this is a complete distraction.
I was like, where are you going with this,
I know. I'm on a tangent. I'm coming off the tangent. Talking to God.
Okay, so let's get back to this. What did Bryce say?
He's saying he took a class of finances that was very good, and said, what should you do if what God tells you is ambiguous? That's interesting.
I think that's a great
That's kind
question.
of what I'm going through right now.
Yeah, because the thing about God that I've found personally, and actually if you look in the Old Testament, and even if you look at how Jesus represents God, Jesus spoke in parables, right? And they were really confusing to a lot of people. And a lot of people were like, just imagine you have this dude standing up talking about God knows what, just a story where he's trying to convey a point. Some people are going to acknowledge that story and say, wow, this dude's off his rocker, right? Some people are going to say, wait, I kind of get this, but I'm not really sure. Some people are going to misinterpret it completely. But then some people are going to say, hey, could you clarify this and actually start knocking, right? Because biblically, the scriptures say, knock and the door shall be open. You start pursuing opening that door.
In this moment, I'm wondering if the reason why God sometimes says things that are ambiguous is to put a hunger in us for the answer, and also sometimes maybe what God... Because I feel like there was one moment a couple months ago, I'm in the forest, I'm with God intentionally, taking a walk, and I get this imagery that I was not thinking up of. It just happened, so I knew it was God. And he put his hands around my stomach, and it made me immediately feel uncomfortable and unsafe when that happened. Because my background dealing with same-sex attraction and homosexuality. So when God put his hands in a place that I would otherwise find a little more intimate, I was just like, I don't feel comfortable with this. But then we ended up having a conversation, and he began to explain to me a whole lot of things from that moment. Though what he did spawned a whole nother conversation entirely, and I felt like that was his plan, to bring something out that I was uncomfortable with, to then address what in that moment he was addressing, why he does not like homosexuality. And we talked about that in the walk, and he shared with me some of the things that were grieving him. But I wonder if sometimes God will just throw random crap at us that seems random, but his purpose, the reason why he's being ambiguous, is because he wants us to dig into what he said, find information from him. Maybe the ambiguity is not even what he wants you to do, but just to get you to start thinking.
Well, springing off of it, using that as a springboard, Bryce, ambiguity is really cool because just imagine if God said, I want you to do A, B, and C. I don't want you to deviate from this, right? That takes all creativity off the table. We're breathed, and he breathed life into us. We are made in his image, right? And God's a creator. That's why Minecraft is so cool. Terraforming is so cool. Naming animals is so cool. And if you just think about what God was thinking in Genesis, when he created everything, right? The last creation he made was us. And he made us in his image, and he said, go forth and multiply and have dominion over the world and subdue it. right? And so when God is being ambiguous with you, especially if he's asking you questions, do you really think that if God didn't have hopes for you and if he didn't believe in your creative spirit, do you think he would ask you questions, or do you think he would just tell you what to do? I think he would ask you questions. Because in our situations, especially in the past year where there's been a lot of ambiguity, it's like, okay, well, God's not telling me specifically what to do, but he's telling me which way to go. How to get there, I'm not quite sure. There's that scripture in Proverbs that says, the heart of man plans his way, but it's God who establishes his steps. You know, and it's like, I have to start moving, right? And I have to say, God, what do you want? And God's often like, well, Tim, what do you want? Right?
So frustrating.
It really is. But here's the thing, man. And Bryce, this will put some closure onto me answering my side of the question. When you start moving forward in that ambiguity, if you do it in a relationship with God, it requires you to continue asking more and more clarifying questions. And so basically that ambiguous space that you have, if you navigate it from a place of God loves me and he wants to lead me through this, it leads you into a space where your relationship can grow. Think about my relationship with my wife. When we were just associations, right, in a small group, there was some ambiguous space there. It was like, okay, well, do you like me? Do I like you? I'm not really sure. And the more we started answering those questions, the more commitment we put to the table, the more intimacy there was. And when you open the door to more intimacy, it's like, when I got married, for instance, it opened the door to more intimacy with my finances, with physical things, with goals, dreams, aspirations, with my vocation, right? We could ask those more penetrating questions. And the more we ask those penetrating questions, and the more that she can get into the intimate side of my life, like what's going on in here, the more questions about it's okay, well, why do you want to quit your job at GameStop and go into life coaching? Oh, okay, so you want to help people. Okay, well, why do you want to help people? And it's that series of asking questions going more and more deep. That's why, for instance, in therapy and coaching, they tell us to not ask yes or no questions. Ask open-ended questions. Ask questions where there's some ambiguity as to what the answer can be instead of a simple yes or no.
Yeah, that is important. He's saying, personally, I tend to think that ambiguous speech from God can be a test. What do you think about this? It could be a test. I don't know if I would jump straight into saying that ambiguous speaking is a test all the time. It could also be that God's just very curious to see what you would do. And there is no wrong answer. Because I'm pretty sure that, like, I'm at the first moment of, maybe you could say, God's ambiguity was when he made Adam before Eve, and he brought all the animals in front of him. Mm-hmm. There was no right or wrong answer what to name those animals. Like, it wasn't like he could pass or fail on what he was going to name them. And he did. He named, I don't know how many animals he named, but I imagine he named them all, I guess.
And Adam was like, I'll call this Cthulhu.
Cthulhu. I'll call this one Fly. Oh boy, thank you. But there was no right or wrong in that situation. I feel like if God's going to be ambiguous, then it's more likely the case that he trusts your decision-making process and he's giving you an option, a chance to decide on things. When God gave us the requirements for doing things with thoughtraid, they didn't say anything about TikTok, nothing about Instagram, nothing about half of what we're doing, but I'm sure he knew that we were going to do that. Mm-hmm. The only requirement is he wanted us to broadcast 3 times a week. And in my situation with him telling me, like, a length of time to stay away from a person in particular, like, that was something that was, again, ambiguous. And I didn't know exactly, was it even him? And I kept going to him about it. But the reality was, when I finally got today, it was like, if it was truly a situation that was life or death, if it was going to hurt you, I would give you more direct information. But it's not.
Well, if you look at a lot of the stories in the Bible, for instance, and I always screw up their names, Meshach, something, and Abednego. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Right? They could have done anything, man. You know, and this was Old Testament when they didn't have the Holy Spirit. And they could have said, "Oh, hey God, this person's going to kill me if I don't denounce you, so I'm going to denounce you for right now, and then I'm going to take it back later on." But they didn't do that, right? They said, "Hey, I'm not going to bow to you." I think it was Nebuchadnezzar. And then they went into the fire, and God was in the fire with them. That's why you hear all these Christian songs. There was another in the fire, whatever. But the reason I bring that up is later on in the New Testament, I think it was Philippians, Solomon was just talking about how God provides. And he was talking about, I think it was Solomon anyways. He was talking about how God clothes the daisies of the field, right? And how even birds don't have to worry about their next meal because God's focused on them. How much more will your Father in heaven provide for you if he provides for these lowly things? And then I think it's in Proverbs where the scriptures say that he has a plan to prosper you, not harm you. And so, like, thinking about all this ambiguity, like the ambiguity with with what we're doing, and some of the ambiguity with what you're going through, Bryce. I think the question that comes to a lot of people's minds when they're trying to follow God is, am I going to make it to the other side if I make the wrong decision? But part of the intimacy value proposition with God is that he has a covenant with you. And a covenant is basically when somebody says, regardless of what you do, I'm going to be in your corner, right? Regardless of how much of a screw up you are, I'm always going to take care of you, right? And because God has that covenant with us, as long as we stay in relationship with him, I mean, even if we don't stay in relationship with him, he's still going to be pursuing us, right? And so regardless of how we respond, he's always going to be forming new plans creatively that are going to put us in a new ambiguous space of deciding with him and partnering with him. And so the reason I bring this up once again is with the ambiguity, we can tend to think, okay, well, I'm going to screw this up beyond God's capability to fix it.
Yeah, no, that's not going to be the case. If God's going to give you something ambiguous and it's going to cause you to make a mistake that's going to be so bad you can't fix it, I don't think he would be ambiguous about it. Or, and I thought about this too as we were talking, I feel like sometimes God intentionally leaves things ambiguous so that we will fail, so that we can learn from that failure. Because failure is sometimes a better teacher than... Failure is always a better teacher than success, I would say.
Well, especially if your heart is hardened towards certain things. Like, I think it's Romans or Hebrews. It's one of the two. I think it was Paul speaking, and he was saying that, and people chose sin, and so God gave them up to their own debased minds to engage in all sorts of fornication and adultery and all these bad things because people chose that. And God was like, took his hands off the wheel, and he let people fall into that because they have, a lot of times, especially people who come to seek Jesus later on in life, they only do it through their own failings, right, and their own shortcomings as sinful creatures. And sometimes we just have to learn the hard way. I mean, Pharaoh learned the hard way.
Yes.
I don't even know if Pharaoh learned.
I don't think he did. He died. He drowned.
Was he in that group?
In what group?
The Red Sea?
Yeah. Pharaoh and his men drowned in the Red Sea, chasing after the Israelites. Dead.
Yeah, well, Bryce, I will say that in my situation, following God through ambiguity, on the other side of it, well, I've always come out on the other side of it, and I've either learned something or I've gained something that's made me prosper. I haven't always prospered through my decisions because sometimes I drop the ball for my side of the relationship, but God has always found some way to redeem it because he's a redeeming father. He never just leaves you alone and says, well, good luck. When you get out of it, come see me.
No, he helps in the process, out of the process, through the process, before the process. He is involved in all of it. He is the God of the process.
Yeah, but I think the key is to just keep asking questions.
Yeah. And
don't allow the world to discourage you from trying to listen.
Someone mentioned, I don't know if it was someone you knew about the Goodson, Joel Goodson, I don't know. I don't know if it was him that mentioned this to you or his wife or someone else entirely. I just remember hearing it, like work until you get to that 50% mark of being positive. Like if you can get a little bit above 50% of hearing if you're sure God is saying something or not. If you're at least 50% or more sure, that's something to move. If you're less than 50%, wait and search God until you can get enough to be confident enough that he's saying.
I've never heard that before.
Someone mentioned it. I don't know who, but it hit me, and I was just like, because you're never going to be 100% when it comes to, did I hear this from God? There will be plenty of things that'll make you doubt yourself if you heard God or not. But if you can get more than halfway through that process, and you're more than 50% positive that God is speaking to you and telling you to do something, then act. You can act on it, or don't if you don't want to. But that's enough. That's more than enough confidence and faith to stand on to make a decision.
Yeah.
But if you're less than 50%, then I would gain a little more wisdom. And like my most recent thing I learned about hearing God's voice is peace doesn't equal God wanting you to do something at 100% of the time. It does not. Sometimes it does. But in my most recent instance of getting a new job, I had peace to get a new job back in like April, but I didn't have the okay to get another job until June, where I had peace and the okay.
You know, I just think about what it's like to be a dad, and you know, I had a father growing up. A lot of you have father. At least I hope you had a father growing up or a father figure. But I think if I ever become a father, you know, I'd want to always position my son or daughter to where everything that they receive from me is at least 10% a challenge, where they have to make the decision. And
it is very good, healthy, important.
Yeah, I think that's super important, but also asking them, well, what do you think about this? And if it seemed, just evaluating, okay, are they in the headspace to want to challenge themselves, or are they in the headspace where they're having a pity party? Like, do they need grace or do they need mercy right now? Or what do they need right now? Because I feel like that's how God speaks to me. Because there are certain times when I'm focused on doing something that's, you know, 180 miles in the wrong direction, and God's like, hey, do you want to turn around? I'm like, no, because I'm doing this and this is good. And he's like, all right, well, when you get off course, you know, 300 miles, you know, my door's still open, and I'm sitting here trudging along. I'm like, God, what did you tell me? You know? But then, like, there are other times where he's like, don't go down that, don't go that way. I'm like, okay. And then he just like that little step of obedience, he acknowledges, okay, well, he's ready to listen. He's willing to listen, you know? And then that's when all this other stuff comes into my plate, like people or more direction, you know? And that's just the ebb and flow of a relationship. A relationship with God, and hearing from him is never a once and done. I mean, look at Gideon. Yeah. Gideon heard as far as engaging in battle, like he was responsible for an army, right? And his army was outnumbered like 100-1 or something ridiculous. Yeah. And each time he was supposed to engage with the enemy, the exact same circumstance, he stopped and he's like, God, what do you want me to do? What do you think about this? Right? And each time he got a different answer. A lot of people will just hear something, they acknowledge, okay, this is God, and they'll just stick with that for the rest of their life.
Yeah, I was thinking. Dan Muller I was watching a video. He was talking about that. They'll bunker down. They'll write a book about it, like how to get victory from God. And they'll go over that one experience and then build a theology off of that. And it's like, nope, stop. That's one time. The most consistent thing about God is that he always does things differently.
What's Bryce saying over there?
He says that's usually for me. This usually for me is what he said. But all that said,
I find myself hearing. Oops, is what he was saying.
Oh, I find myself hearing people say they think what they think God told them. This is hard for me to always take at face value. I mean, yeah, and in general, you can't just take everything someone says, even if they say that God told them that, as thus saith the Lord. Even, like, you know, you're in my life quite frequently. Not every time am I going to get it 100% correct. Like, I'm just going to put it out there. I'm not always going to get it correct. And so there's, you know, questions that can be had and conversations that could be gone over that thing until finally we get to the root cause of it. But I guess it's like a circumstance by circumstance. Where do you have peace about what they're saying? how are they bringing what they say to you? Are they listening? All that kind of stuff, can all be indicator facts of whether that came from God or not.
Yeah, well, the other thing too, man, is that whether somebody did or did not hear from God and they're marching forward saying, God told me this, I think in the traditional church that I knew, it's really important to correct that stuff and make, are you sure? And, cross-reference that with the Bible. But I think God's a lot more creative and he's a lot more relaxed about things like that, at least in the New Testament, because of the Holy Spirit, right? So if somebody engages in a relationship with God and they're going 180 miles per hour in the wrong direction, they're going to be responsible for that sooner or later, not us. So, for instance, in my relationship with my wife, actually, I won't use Ariane. I'm going to use the Hams, Joy and Eric Ham.
Okay.
Two people that go to our church. Yeah, they were looking for a house a while back. And Eric was telling me the story, and Eric Ham said that his wife Joy came to him and said, I think I found the house. Right? And Eric didn't have peace about this. He's like, I don't have peace about this. But Joy said, I think God is leading me in this direction. And I'm not getting the story exactly the same. So Eric, Joy, if you watch this, I'm sorry if I'm not doing you justice or misrepresenting. But basically what Eric said was, if God told you to do that, you need to pursue it. And so Joy went and checked out the house. And she was all excited about it. And she had one of their friends come out and check the foundation. And the foundation was cracked. And there were all these other things that kept happening, which made her realize, oh, this actually wasn't God. And then down the road, a couple weeks later, Joy came to him apparently, and the conversation was something like, well, okay, I think I misheard, or I was wrong, essentially. And that story, once again, I paraphrased it. Some of the details might not be exact, and I'm sorry about that. But that was a really good example. And I really needed to hear that because the way Eric modeled that was, well, if you feel like this is from God, you need to pursue it. God redeemed and God really respected his worship, because that was worship. That was basically saying, God, I believe that you are who you say you are. And if this person has it wrong, I know you're going to correct them. And I know that if this person has it wrong and it's going to influence me in a negative way, I know that you're going to protect me. Right? Because God, biblically, scriptures say that God is an avenger.
But, at the same time, I don't think God always calls us to something because it is the perfect fit or whatever. I could still see God calling her to look at that place, because out of doing that, she got to see all the problems that are with it. And God, because sometimes our hearts get set on something, and the only way to unset that is to just allow us to go forth into that thing. So it could have still been God giving her peace to go ahead and do that, because look at the results. She went, and then she saw what was going wrong with it, and then they avoided a bad place entirely.
Well, this is what we were talking about earlier, about how when you run into that ambiguous space, or you lean into it, right, it creates more ambiguous space for more questions. So Joy's question to God, or conversation to God, could have been something like, okay, God, I felt like you moved me in this direction. I went in this direction with all these preconceived notions or these expectations that were not met. What did you actually mean? Did you mean for me to learn something from it? Did you mean for me to lean on a relationship where this person came out and they served me? Is that what you were doing? Were you just building a relationship with my husband where basically he was trusting me with you? There could have been, there's 50 different avenues she could have taken with that thought process. But basically, it was one opportunity that created multiple branching storylines of conversation, and that just increases the intimacy. And that's really what we're talking about today, leaning into how to talk to God.
Yeah. But I'd like to keep going, but I know we're probably 50 minutes in. Wrong one. Let me see. 48. Not too bad. So we'll just cut it off here for now. But let us know, guys, if you've really enjoyed this conversation and you'd like for us to talk more about hearing God's voice and just kind of build a dialogue around that and just compare notes and whatever. Let us know in the comments. Send us a message, thoughtraid@gmail.com, whatever you'd like to do. But if you really did enjoy this and you want us to talk more on it, I'm glad I'm learning. I'm learning as we're talking about all this. So please let us know in the comments or send us an email or message us, however you want to go about that. And if you've liked this stream, make sure to like it and to subscribe. And to hit the bell notification if you're on YouTube particularly, because that way when we go live, we can have you be a part of that, and we love to have you join in with us on the streams. That way we can have more conversations like this. It's always fun. So I want to thank you guys for watching. We broadcast every week on Mondays, Fridays, and Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so we'd love to have you there. This Friday, we're going to be talking about how homosexuality lied to me.
I can see far away from where I've been. He says I see a potential. I see a potential in my eyes. I see a potential. I never lost sight of the reason why you're alive. You're alive. You're alive. We sing Jesus.